I still remember the feeling of the hotel carpet against my cheek. Soft, expensive. The kind of luxury you'd expect from the plaza on your wedding night. I was tucked under that massive king-sized bed, trying so hard not to giggle, waiting for David to walk in so I could grab his ankle and scare the hell out of him. Childish, maybe. But I was happy. God, I was so stupidly happy. The champagne they'd given me downstairs was making everything feel warm and fuzzy, and I actually thought I'd married my soulmate. I heard the door click open, and I held my breath, ready to pounce. But then I heard her voice, Martha, my new mother-in-law, and the entire world shifted under me. Did you crush them fine enough? Martha's voice was cold, clinical. I heard David's footsteps move toward the nightstand, and through the gap between the bedskirt and the floor, I saw his polished shoes stop right next to me. My heart started pounding, but not from excitement anymore. Yes, Mother, 3 pills. Just like Dr. Evans said, she won't know the difference mixed with her tea in the morning. I felt my stomach drop. Pills? What pills? I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The champagne fog in my head suddenly felt sinister, heavy, like it was pulling me down into quicksand. Good, Martha continued, and I heard her heels click closer. The doctor already signed the commitment papers. We'll claim a psychotic break, erratic behavior, self-harm threats. By noon tomorrow, she'll be in the psych ward, and you'll have legal guardianship of her assets. The company will be ours before the honeymoon photos even print. My vision blurred. Not from tears. From whatever they'd put in that champagne. I dug my nails into my palm, fighting to stay conscious, fighting to stay silent. This couldn't be real. This was my wedding night. David loved me. Didn't he? But then I heard him laugh. That same laugh I'd fallen for 6 months ago, now sounding like broken glass. She practically handed it to me. Mother. God, she's so trusting. Like a puppy. The room started spinning. I could feel myself slipping, the drugs pulling me under, and all I could think was, I have to stay awake. I have to hear this. I have to survive this. Martha's voice became an echo. Once she's declared incompetent, we liquidate the offshore accounts first, then we'll work on Frank. That old fool won't even see us coming. Their footsteps moved toward the door, and just before everything went black, I heard Martha say one last thing. Sleep tight, Sarah. Tomorrow, your whole world ends. 6 months earlier, I met David at a charity gala in Silicon Valley. He wasn't like the others. You know the type. The venture capitalists in their Patagonia vests, the crypto bros who couldn't stop talking about their portfolios, the guys who saw my last name and practically salivated. David was different. He was a nonprofit director. Humble. He wore a suit that was nice but not trying too hard nice. When he introduced himself, he didn't ask what I did. He asked what I cared about, and God help me, I fell for it. I fell hard. We talked for 3 hours that night about ocean conservation, about his work building schools in Guatemala, about how money didn't define a person's worth. He never once Googled me. Or so I thought. My father, Frank Castellano, built Technova from nothing. Garage startup to $15 billion in market cap. He taught me to code before I could ride a bike, and by 25, I was VP of cybersecurity. I'd earned my place at that table, but Dad never trusted David. Not from day one. Sarah, sweetheart, he'd said the night I told him we were engaged. That man looks at you the way a jeweler looks at a diamond, like he's calculating your value. I'd rolled my eyes, accused him of being overprotective, told him David was the first man who'd ever loved me for me, not for my inheritance. Dad backed off after that, but I caught him running background checks, hiring investigators. I thought he was being paranoid. I thought I knew better. I was 28 years old, running a Fortune 500 division, and I thought I was too smart to be fooled. The wedding was perfect. Too perfect, looking back. Martha insisted on handling everything. The flowers, the venue, even the champagne toast before David and I went upstairs. "It's a family tradition," she'd said with that smile that never reached her eyes. "My grandmother did it. I did it. Now you must too. It's for fertility and luck." She'd handed me the crystal flute herself, watched me drain it, and patted my hand like I was a child. I remember David kissing my forehead in the lobby, telling me to go up and get comfortable, that he'd be up in 10 minutes. I remember feeling floaty as I rode the elevator to the 50th floor. I remember deciding to hide under the bed because I wanted to start our marriage with laughter. I remember thinking, as I crawled under that bed frame, that I was the luckiest woman alive. And then I heard the door open, and I learned what real luck actually looks like. The carpet smelled like lemon cleaning solution and something else. Lavender, maybe. My cheek was pressed against it, and I was trying to control my breathing, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. But then they came back into the room. David and Martha. I heard the closet door slide open, heard the zipper of my suitcase being yanked. "Where is it?" Martha hissed. "It has to be here. She never goes anywhere without it." I watched their feet move around the room. Martha's Louboutins, David's Oxfords. They were tearing through my things like wolves through a carcass. Through the thin gap under the bed skirt, I could see my honeymoon clothes being thrown onto the floor, my silk nightgown, my passport, everything. "The security token," David muttered. "She keeps it on her keychain, right?" My blood went cold. The token. It was a small device, looked like a car fob, but it generated two-factor authentication codes for Technova's executive transfer systems. Without it, even with power of attorney, even with guardianship papers, they couldn't move money out of the company accounts. Dad had designed it that way. Paranoid bastard. Thank God for paranoid bastards. "Check her purse again," Martha snapped. I heard my bag being dumped out. Lipstick rolling across the hardwood. My wallet hitting the floor. Nothing. Damn it. David's voice was rising, losing that gentle tone I'd fallen in love with. Maybe she left it at her father's house, or in her car. Martha's breathing was sharp, frustrated. "We'll find it tomorrow, after she's committed. We'll have access to everything then. Her apartment, her office. Frank won't be able to stop us once the doctors declare her incompetent." Then I heard something drop. Something small and metallic hitting the floor right next to the bed. A pearl earring, Martha's. It rolled under the bed skirt, and I watched in absolute frozen horror as her perfectly manicured hand reached under, fingers stretching toward it, toward me. I pulled back as far as I could, my spine pressed against the opposite side of the bed frame, holding my breath until my lungs burned. Her fingers were inches from my face. Inches. I could see her engagement ring, some massive diamond that probably cost more than most people's houses. Time stopped. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure she'd hear it. And then David's phone rang. The sound shattered the moment. Martha pulled her hand back, grabbed the earring, stood up. "It's Evans," David said, looking at his screen. "Probably confirming the morning pickup." Martha smoothed her dress. "Answer it, and make sure the sedatives are in place. I want her too confused to call for help before the ambulance arrives." They walked toward the door, and I heard David's voice shift into that charming register he used with everyone. "Dr. Evans, yes, everything's set. See you at 9 a.m., sharp." The door closed, the lock clicked, and then I heard something that made my stomach drop even further. The sound of a deadbolt being turned from the outside. They'd locked me in. I waited 30 seconds after I heard their footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I crawled out from under that bed like I was clawing my way out of a grave. My hands were shaking. No, my entire body was shaking. The champagne they'd drugged was still working through my system, making everything feel like I was moving through honey. Thick, slow, wrong. I stumbled to the nightstand and grabbed for my phone. Gone. Of course it was gone. Martha had lifted it from my purse downstairs. probably while I was saying goodbye to the bridesmaids. I lunged for the hotel phone, that old-school landline on the desk. I picked up the receiver. Dead silence. They'd cut the line. Jesus Christ, they'd thought of everything. Panic started rising in my chest, but I forced it down. Think, Sarah. Think like Dad taught you. I looked around the room. What did I have? A smart TV, a digital thermostat, a tablet on the desk for room service orders. And then it clicked. Everything in this hotel was connected. The plaza had upgraded to a full IoT system 2 years ago. I'd read about it in a tech journal. Every device on the same network, every device with a wireless signal. I grabbed the desk chair and dragged it to the thermostat on the wall. My fingers were clumsy, but I managed to pop off the cover with a butter knife from the room service tray. Inside was exactly what I needed: a circuit board, a tiny processor, and a Wi-Fi transmitter sending data to the hotel's central system. I didn't need to make a call. I needed to send a signal. I pulled the tablet over and started typing, my vision blurring every few seconds from whatever they'd given me. I hacked into the thermostat's admin panel using a backdoor exploit I'd discovered during a security audit last year. It took me 8 tries to get the password right. My fingers kept hitting the wrong keys. But then I was in. I rerouted the thermostat's signal through the hotel's network and out to the internet. Then I coded a distress packet, a specific sequence, SOS in binary, followed by my location coordinates and a timestamp. I sent it to the only IP address I had memorized by heart, Dad's private server at home, the one he used for encrypted family communications, the one he checked every morning with his coffee. I hit send and watched the little confirmation message pop up on screen. Then I turned to the smart TV. If they'd been in this room, if they'd said what they said, the TV would have recorded it. These TVs had built-in cameras and mics for video calls, and they kept a rolling buffer of the last 3 hours for quality assurance. I accessed the system, found the footage, and started uploading it to Technova's secure cloud. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 20%. My hands were going numb. 50%. I collapsed into the chair, fighting to stay conscious just a little longer. 85%. The room was spinning. 100%. Upload complete. I slumped forward onto the desk, and the last thing I thought before everything went black was, "Dad, please check your server. Please." Frank Castellano was drinking his morning espresso when the alarm on his private server started screaming. It was 6:47 a.m. He'd been awake since 5 like he had been every day for 40 years, and he was sitting in his home office overlooking the bay when his screen lit up with an emergency protocol he'd designed specifically for his daughter. SOS, room 502, Plaza Hotel, timestamp, 11:43 p.m. His blood went cold. He didn't call 911. He didn't call the local police. Frank had been building empires long enough to know that money could buy badges, judges, doctors, anyone. Instead, he opened his phone and sent a single encrypted message to a contact labeled Hawk. Within 6 minutes, a team of 4 was wheels up in his private helicopter. Former Mossad, former SAS, the kind of people who didn't exist on paper but could extract a target from a locked room 50 floors up without anyone hearing a sound. They landed on the plaza's rooftop at 7:22 a.m. Hotel security didn't even notice. Frank owned 12% of the parent company, and he'd made a single phone call to ensure the cameras on the top floor looped for exactly 8 minutes. The team rappelled down to the balcony of room 502. The leader, a woman named Eliza, who'd once pulled a diplomat out of Tehran, picked the balcony lock in 11 seconds. They found me slumped over the desk, barely breathing, the tablet still glowing beside me. Eliza checked my pulse, then radioed Frank. "A target acquired. Vital signs weak but stable. Evidence of chemical sedation." She pulled a preloaded syringe from her med kit. an emergency stimulant cocktail designed to counteract benzodiazepines. She injected it into my arm, and I gasped awake like I'd been drowning. The world came back in fragments, Eliza's face, the tactical gear, my father's voice crackling through her radio. "Sarah, baby, can you hear me?" I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. "We're getting you out. Stay with us." They wrapped me in a jacket and carried me to the balcony. I remember looking down and seeing the city 50 floors below, the morning sun just starting to paint the buildings gold. They clipped me into a harness, and we ascended to the roof. The helicopter blades were deafening. Dad was waiting inside, and when he pulled me into his arms, I started crying. Not from fear, from rage. "I want them destroyed," I whispered against his shoulder. "Sarah, we need to get you to a hospital. We need to document." "No." I pulled back and looked him dead in the eye. The stimulant was kicking in, burning through the fog. "They want a show tomorrow. We're giving them a show, but on my terms." Dad studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. He'd built an empire by being ruthless when he needed to be, and now his daughter was asking for the same courtesy. "What do you need?" he asked. I smiled, and it felt like ice forming over a lake. "I need you to trust me, and I need them to think they've won." We flew to a private medical facility where Dad's personal physician pumped me full of IV fluids and ran a tox screen. Rohypnol and Ambien. "Enough to knock out a horse," he said. Enough to make someone seem incoherent, confused, dangerous to themselves. By 8:30 a.m., I was clear-headed and furious. Dad's security team went back to the plaza and staged the scene exactly how I told them. They messed up the bed, knocked over a lamp, scattered pills on the bathroom floor to make it look like I'd panicked and fled. Then they erased themselves from every camera angle and waited. At 8:52 a.m., David's keycard clicked in the door of room 502. I watched it all happen in real time from Dad's laptop, tapped into the hotel's security feed. David walked in first, Martha right behind him, and their faces, oh God, their faces when they saw the empty room were priceless. Shock, then calculation. Then Martha's mouth curved into this smile that made my skin crawl. "Call the police," she said, and her voice was dripping with fake concern. "Tell them she's having a breakdown. She's a danger to herself." David pulled out his phone, and I watched him transform. His shoulders slumped. His voice cracked. "Yes, 911? My wife? She's missing. We just got married last night, and I woke up and she's gone. The room is destroyed. I think she hurt herself. Please, you have to find her. Her name is Sarah Castellano. She has a history of mental health issues." That was a lie. I'd never had a single psychological problem in my life. But it didn't matter. The narrative was being built brick by brick, and they were so confident, so sure that they'd covered every angle. At 9:14 a.m., Dr. Evans arrived. I'd never met him before, but Dad's investigators had found his record: 3 malpractice suits, a suspended license in Nevada, a man who'd do anything for the right price. He didn't even ask to see me. He just stood in that destroyed hotel room, nodded at whatever Martha whispered in his ear, and signed a psychiatric hold order. Right there, on hotel stationery. Based on the evidence of erratic behavior and the family's testimony, I'm recommending immediate involuntary commitment for evaluation, he said, and David actually hugged him. The brunch was scheduled for 11 a.m. at the hotel's grand ballroom. Technova's board of directors, key shareholders, financial journalists. Martha had arranged everything weeks ago, claiming it was a celebration breakfast for the newlyweds. But I knew what it really was. A stage. David was going to stand up there, play the devastated husband, and ask the board to grant him temporary control of my shares and my position until Sarah recovers. They'd have the signed psychiatric order. They'd have the chaos of the missing bride. They'd have sympathy. And they'd have power. I watched David straighten his tie in the hotel mirror, practicing his sad face, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not fear, not anymore. Focus. "Dad," I said, closing the laptop. "It's time. Let's go give them their show." The ballroom was packed. I could see it all from the service hallway behind the stage, watching through a crack in the curtain. 200 people in tailored suits, sipping mimosas, whispering about the drama. The missing bride, the devastated groom. Technova's stock had already dipped 3% on the rumor mill. David was at the podium, his eyes red like he'd been crying. Maybe he had been. Crocodile tears are still wet, after all. "Thank you all for coming during this difficult time," he said, his voice breaking in all the right places. She's struggling. And as her husband, as someone who loves her more than anything, I'm asking for your support. I'm asking the board to grant me temporary authority over her shares so that Technova can continue to thrive while she gets the help she needs." The room murmured sympathetically. I watched Martha in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the concerned mother-in-law like she'd rehearsed it. Dr. Evans was 3 seats down, nodding solemnly, ready to testify if anyone questioned the diagnosis. I was crouched behind the AV booth with Dad's head of IT security, a brilliant woman named Kira who could hack a Pentagon server before her morning coffee. She'd already breached the ballroom's presentation system. 1 USB drive, 15 seconds. And now I had total control of the massive screen behind David's head. "Ready when you are," Kira whispered, her fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard. I watched David shuffle his papers, building to his big emotional crescendo, and I nodded. "Do it." The screen behind him flickered. David didn't notice at first. He was too focused on his performance. But the audience noticed. Their eyes shifted from him to the screen, and the murmuring stopped. The video started playing. Hotel room. Night vision from the smart TV camera. Crystal clear audio. Martha's voice filled the ballroom. Did you crush them fine enough?" I watched 200 faces go from confusion to shock in real time. David spun around and saw himself on screen, standing at the nightstand, dropping pills into a small dish. His own voice echoed through the speakers. "Yes, Mother. 3 pills. Just like Dr. Evans said. She won't know the difference mixed with her tea in the morning." Someone gasped. Then someone else. David lunged for the podium microphone. This is fake. It's AI. It's a deep fake." But the video kept playing. Martha's face in high definition. "By noon tomorrow, she'll be in the psych ward, and you'll have legal guardianship of her assets. The company will be ours before the honeymoon photos even print." The room exploded, chairs scraping, voices shouting, phones being pulled out to record. And then Kira switched to the second file, a bank transfer screenshot, David's personal account to Dr. Evans, $50,000, date, 3 days ago, description, consultation fee, psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Evans went white. He stood up like he was going to run, but Dad's security was already blocking the exits. David was still at the podium, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment. I straightened my dress, nodded to Kira, and walked toward the ballroom doors. The double doors opened, and every head in that ballroom turned. I walked in, and the chaos stopped like someone had hit a pause button. I was wearing the Dior suit I'd planned for the day after brunch. Hair perfect, makeup flawless. Not a single sign of the psychotic break they'd tried to manufacture. My father was on my left. On my right, 3 FBI agents in dark suits, badges clipped to their belts. Behind us, another 6 agents fanned out to cover the exits. I didn't rush. I walked down that center aisle like I was floating, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and I watched David's face cycle through every stage of panic, denial, confusion, recognition, terror. When I reached the front, I stopped 3 feet from the podium and just stared at him. For 5 long seconds, nobody said a word. "Hello, David." My voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a hurricane. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like." I tilted my head. "Really? Because it looks like you and your mother tried to drug me, commit me to a psychiatric facility, and steal my company. But please, enlighten me. What is it exactly?" He took a step back, bumping into the podium, and the microphone screeched with feedback. Martha stood up from her seat, her face twisted with rage. "You little bitch! You think you can—" "Sit down, Martha." Dad's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The adults are talking." She looked like she wanted to lunge at him, but one of the FBI agents shifted closer, and she sank back into her chair, shaking. I pulled the security token from my pocket, that little device they'd torn my suitcase apart looking for. I held it up so everyone could see. "You wanted this, didn't you, David? This little piece of plastic that authorizes executive fund transfers." I turned it over in my hand, almost casually. "The funny thing is, you never needed it to steal from me. You just needed it to think you'd gotten away with it." I pressed the button. The screen behind me changed again. Audit logs. Transaction records. For the past 3 months, David had been siphoning money from Technova's charitable foundation. Small amounts. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, routing it through his nonprofit and into offshore accounts. $2.3 million total. I'd found it all at 3 a.m., 2 weeks ago during a routine security audit, and I'd been watching him, waiting to see how deep the rot went. Turns out, it went all the way to the core. "The FBI has been investigating you for wire fraud since last month," I said, and I watched his knees actually buckle. "I've been cooperating with them. And last night, you handed them conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and drugging charges on a silver platter." Agent Torres stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from his belt. "David Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted false imprisonment, and administering drugs without consent." David didn't fight. He just stood there, numb, as they cuffed his wrists behind his back. But Martha tried to run. She bolted toward the kitchen service entrance, her Louboutins skidding on the marble, and she almost made it. Almost. Dad's security chief, a former linebacker named Marcus, stepped into her path, and she bounced off him like she'd hit a brick wall. 2 female agents were on her in seconds, and her screaming echoed through the ballroom as they read her Miranda rights. Dr. Evans was already being escorted out through the side door, his head down, his career obliterated. And me? I walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at 200 faces staring at me in absolute stunned silence. "For those of you wondering," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear, "I'm perfectly sane, I'm perfectly healthy, and I'm perfectly capable of running this company." The room was so quiet, you could hear the ice melting in someone's mimosa. What you just witnessed was an attempted coup, not by a rival corporation, not by foreign hackers, but by the man I trusted enough to marry, and the woman I was foolish enough to call family. I paused, letting that sink in. Technova was built on innovation, integrity, and security, and I will not let anyone, husband, mother-in-law, or corrupt doctor, compromise those values. The applause started slowly. 1 person, then 5. Then the entire room was standing, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Not relief. Not yet, but something close to it. The aftermath moved fast. David and Martha were transported to federal holding within the hour. The charges stacked up like a house of cards built in reverse. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted unlawful imprisonment, administering controlled substances without consent, wire fraud, money laundering, and my personal favorite, aggravated identity theft for forging my signature on financial documents I'd never seen. Doctor? Evans was arrested at JFK trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with a duffel bag containing $200,000 in cash. He flipped on David and Martha before his lawyer even arrived, confirming he'd been paid to sign the commitment papers without ever meeting me. The local news picked it up by noon, national news by 3. By dinner, it was trending worldwide. Tech heiress foils husband's plot to steal fortune, read one headline. Wedding night turns into corporate espionage thriller, read another. My favorite was from a tech blog. She hacked her way out of a psych ward commitment using a hotel thermostat. This is next-level cybersecurity. I signed the annulment papers 72 hours later in a judge's chambers. The fastest annulment in New York State history, thanks to the small detail that my husband had been actively trying to destroy my life before we'd even consummated the marriage. I used David's back as a writing surface. Literally. They brought him into the room in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, bent him over the table, and I signed my name on the documents pressed against his spine. He didn't say a word. What could he say? Martha got 15 years. David got 12. Doctor. Evans got 8 and lost his medical license permanently. The nonprofit David had been running was dissolved, and the stolen funds were returned to Technova's charitable foundation. I personally oversaw their reallocation to actual schools in Guatemala, the ones David had used as props in his con. Every article about him now includes the word fraud in the first sentence. His name is Poison. Their family name is Poison. And me? I stood in that empty ballroom 3 days after the arrest, after all the journalists had left, after the board had reconfirmed my position with a unanimous vote. The cleaning crew was taking down the chairs. Someone was mopping up spilled champagne near the stage. I looked at the spot where David had stood, trying to steal my life, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, clear certainty that I'd cut out a cancer before it could metastasize. Dad came up beside me and put his hand on my shoulder. You okay, kiddo? I thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I said finally. I am. They tried to bury me, but they forgot I knew how to dig. He smiled, proud and sad at the same time. You're more ruthless than I ever was. I looked at him. I learned from the best. We walked out of that ballroom together, and I didn't look back. Not once. Because the thing about cutting out parasites is this: you don't mourn them. You just make sure they never, ever come back. They wanted me silenced. They wanted me drugged, locked away, declared incompetent so they could pick my life apart like vultures on a carcass. But here's what they didn't understand. The most dangerous voice isn't the one that screams. It's the one that waits. The one that listens. The one that gathers every single piece of evidence while hiding under a bed, fighting off sedatives, and then stands up at exactly the right moment to burn their entire world down. I didn't just survive their trap, I turned it into their cage. And you know what? I sleep better now than I ever did when I thought David loved me. Because now I know the difference between a partner and a predator. And I make damn sure my doors are locked. Technova's stock recovered within a week. Turns out investors love a CEO who can outmaneuver a criminal conspiracy on her wedding night. The board gave me a standing ovation at the next shareholder meeting. But honestly, the stock price, the headlines, the vindication, none of that was the real victory. The real victory was the look on Martha's face when the judge denied her bail. The real victory was David's mugshot going viral with the caption, "World's Dumbest Criminal." The real victory was me, standing in my corner office 3 months later, looking out at the city, knowing that I'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and came out stronger. Not bitter, not broken, stronger. Dad asked me once if I regretted any of it. regretted trusting David, regretted the wedding, regretted not listening to his warnings. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. No, I told him, because now I know what I'm capable of. They tried to bury me, and I became the earthquake. He nodded, that proud smile crossing his face. You know, he said, your mother would have done the exact same thing. And that's when I realized I didn't just save my company that night, I saved myself. I proved that I could face evil wearing a wedding ring and a smile, and I could dismantle it piece by piece without losing who I was. They wanted to make me a victim. Instead, they made me dangerous. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that moment under the bed. The carpet against my cheek. The terror. The drugs pulling me under. And I think about how close I came to losing everything. But then I remember what happened next. How I fought through the fog. How I hacked my way to freedom using a damn thermostat. How I stood in that ballroom and watched my enemies fall. And I smile. Because the scariest thing in the world isn't a woman who's been betrayed. It's a woman who's been betrayed and decides to do something about it. They thought they were locking me in a cage, but all they did was teach me how to pick the lock. And once you learn that skill, you never forget it. I barely escaped, but not everyone does. I escaped by inches, but Judge Eleanor? She faced something equally cruel, a betrayal from her own son. Imagine faking your vacation to spy on your family, hiding in your neighbor's attic, only to watch them breaking into your wall safe through binoculars. You need to see how a retired judge makes justice happen when the police arrive. Click here to watch.